What is going on, guys? In today's video, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly about living in Fort Lauderdale. Yeah, we are going to talk about some of the cookie cutter stuff like the weather and the beaches and things like that, but we're also going to talk about things that you might have not thought about before moving to Fort Lauderdale, or just kind of thought about that might not want to make you move to Fort Lauderdale at the same time. So let's jump right into it. Before we do get started though, guys, all I ask is that you hit the like and subscribe button if you want to learn more about Florida real estate, and just pretty much life here in general. All right, so let's start off with the negative stuff first. Let's just get it out of the way, eat the frog, get it done with. So first con I have about living in Fort Lauderdale is the weather. And like I told you, we're gonna have to talk about it. There's no way around it. So it's both a con and a pro. So on the negative side of it, it's the heat, the humidity, and the hurricanes, along with some of the rain. So most of the year, yes, the weather is beautiful, but in the summer, I'm telling you, those summers are brutal. Like, you go outside and you're just sweating no matter what time of the day you go out, and that's also attributing to the humidity as well. So you can go take the dog out at midnight and still be sweating. You're gonna have to take a shower. I mean, it's brutal, but it's definitely better than dealing with the cold, I will say that. On the flip side of that is the rain. So like today, for example, it's been pouring nonstop all day. No, it doesn't happen that often where it's just raining all day, but we do get days like that. And in the summer, I can almost guarantee you right around 3:30, anytime that like football practice is gonna be, it's gonna rain. It's rain for about 15, 20 minutes, complete monsoon. You're not gonna be able to see anything. And then it'll stop, and then it's gonna be humid as hell. And that sucks. Kind of tying into the rain, we do get hurricanes. They're not that, like, we don't get them that often like people think, like we're getting a hurricane every other day. And you do get a heads up before they do come. It's not like, oh, hurricane's gonna be here in an hour. No, you usually get a couple days heads up. We haven't, knock on wood, had a bad one in a while down here in South Florida, but it is something to be aware of. Next con is the traffic. And it seems like everyone kind of got used to traffic during COVID and nobody really being out. You're like, oh, I can get everywhere in like 2 minutes. Not anymore. So traffic is brutal. A1A, 95, Federal, all are just like, don't go on it. It's just miserable pretty much from anywhere from 17th Street, Las Olas-ish area, all the way up to about Commercial. The secret to getting around it, I mean, you didn't hear from me, is going down Dixie. So Dixie's not as busy. There's a little bit more lights, but it's nowhere near going on like A1A, Federal, and 95. A1A and 95 are just like a no-go. I mean, it's gonna take you forever. Federal's not as bad. You just keep getting stuck at all the lights. That's like the pain in the butt part about it. But it seems like it's a necessary evil because everything is on Federal. So that's just one thing to think about. Granted, traffic is not as bad as some other major cities. Like Miami traffic is way, way worse than Fort Lauderdale traffic. But if you're coming from somewhere where you're not used to like a ton of cars being out, a ton of traffic, it's going to be something that's going to take getting used to. Like, especially if you live out west and like, let's say Coral Springs, Parkland area, there's traffic out there, but nothing like that of Fort Lauderdale. And kind of tying into traffic is the amount of people. So it's not necessarily a con, but there's a ton of people out all the time. And whether you're going to the beach, you're going to a bar, you're going to a restaurant, you're going to do something with your family, it's gonna be packed and it's gonna be crowded. Granted, there are days where it's not as busy, but for the most part, there's a lot of people just being around because, let's face it, Fort Lauderdale is a huge tourist destination, especially during peak times like summer, spring break, and those winter months when the snowbirds come down. We get a lot of people from Canada as well as the Northeast that come down and do spend the winters here and then go back in the summers. So you're having a mix all the time of people down here who are not normally from here. So it's just kind of chaotic at times, but it's still not that bad. Like, the videos you see for spring break are about as wild as it's gonna get, and that's for like a week or two. And most of the locals just don't go to the beach anyway. Like, and we'll get into that with the pros, but I mean, you just kind of avoid it during those times, and then you go when it's not as busy. So it's not that bad, and you just have to think about it and plan ahead. Like, if you don't have a reservation for dinner on a Friday night and it's 8 o'clock, just prepare to wait about 30 minutes to an hour and a half. Like, it's no way around it, especially if it's a busy restaurant. Like, you gotta make a reservation. But that being said, most of the time you're good. Like, it's not terrible, but it's nice to be around people at the same time. So not a bad thing whatsoever. I would say probably the last con is the lack of public transportation. And it's not just Fort Lauderdale. I would say it's South Florida and Florida in general. Like, we don't have a very good public transportation system like that of Northeast states or even major cities like Chicago and New York, Philly, like all those, like you have the bus, you have taxis, you have the subway. Here we have Uber, Lyft, 2 feet, bike, your own car. That's really it. We do have the Bright Line, which is actually really, really nice. I've taken it quite a few times. I mean, right now it's only going a few places. So it starts off in Miami, goes from Miami to Aventura to Fort Lauderdale, Fort Lauderdale to Boca, Boca to West Palm, and now they are going to be bringing that West Palm station all the way to Orlando, and you get off at MCO, and that should open up in the second quarter of 2023, but we're still waiting on that. But it is a little bit pricier. It's not like it's going to be a couple dollars. Usually one-way ticket, cheapest one's about 21 bucks. So that's something to take into consideration. And most people do who live here end up having their own car, and one of the downsides of that is parking. So parking is probably another con about living in Fort Lauderdale. Like, you go to the beach, it's going to cost you to park. You go downtown, it's going to cost you to park. You go out to eat, most places you can get away with not having to pay to park, but there's still places you're going to have to pay to park. And that's just something you're going to have to budget at the same time and just kind of think about, because if you're going to the beach every day, paying $6, $7, it starts adding up. Like, you just don't realize those kind of things. And it's not the worst thing in the world, like you're going to have to pay no matter what, but it's just trying to being aware of it and not thinking that like, oh, I'm just going to go to the beach, I'm not going to bring any money. You're going to have to pay, and during peak seasons, it's been as high as like 30, 35 bucks just to park to go to the beach. Now the fun stuff, why you actually want to move to and live in Fort Lauderdale. So let's start off with my personal favorite, the outdoor activities. So no matter what you want to do, whether it be golf, frisbee golf, which I just started playing, it's actually really fun, football, basketball, things like that, water sports, going to the beach, biking, running, literally anything you want to do outside, you can do it. And it's so nice because, I mean, us people who've lived here our entire lives kind of take it for granted. And then you hear about places where like in the winter, they can't really go outside, and they're like 5-6 months where they're just stuck inside. Well, December it's 70, probably not 70, about in the 80s, mid 80s. And we can still go outside and go for a run. No issues, go play basketball, go play football, and you can go do it. And there's even more and more places popping up for pickleball, which I haven't played yet, but it's really grown, especially in like the West Palm area and down in Miami. And Fort Lauderdale's starting to get a couple courts, but it's still not there on the same level as some of those other cities, but you can play it all year round. Speaking of outdoor activities and things to do, you have to talk about like being on the water. So that's a huge pro, and that's pretty much like the epitome of the Fort Lauderdale lifestyle, is just being on the water. So Fort Lauderdale is the yachting capital of the world, so boating is a huge way of life in Fort Lauderdale and South Florida in general. So whether you own a boat, you're going to rent a boat, jet skis, kayak, paddleboard, just finding some way to be on the water, you'll kind of realize like, whoa, this has opened up an entire new world to me about just like, number one, the people you meet, just number two, just like, I personally think it's much more fun than the beaches, which are another pro that we're going to talk about. But when you go on a boat, you can do so much more. You can explore, you can kind of go to different areas for like sandbars and things, and kind of hang out with your friends, but it's not sitting there sweating on the beach. But the beach is still good. So let's talk about that. So another pro of living in Fort Lauderdale is the world-class beaches. I mean, people from all over the world come to Fort Lauderdale for the beaches. Like, beaches are almost second to none in Florida, and Florida has some of the best beaches in the entire United States. You can fight me on that one. But the beaches there are just, number one, it's huge. So like not everyone's on top of each other, which is great. They have basketball courts. They have like an outdoor like aerobics, like for calisthenics and things. So you can do like pull-ups, ring dips, all that. And that's kind of cool. And at the same time, people go run up and down the beach. Then there's plenty of restaurants and bars along the beach as well. So like you don't have to sit up there and just sweat your butt off the entire day. Obviously you can get in the water, but you can come back, go grab a bite to eat, then walk right back across the street and go back to the beach. Plus, like, okay, maybe Fort Lauderdale Beach isn't your thing. You can go up to Lauderdale by the Sea Beach, super quiet, Pompano Beach, Hollywood Beach, like everything is right around there. Dania Beach, like you're within maybe at the most, I think, 20 minutes with traffic. So it's not a bad gig whatsoever. Another great thing about living in Fort Lauderdale is the vibrant nightlife. So obviously when you think of South Florida and you think of nightlife, you think of Miami, all the clubs like Club Live, Story, all those. But Fort Lauderdale nightlife is just, I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's a step below Miami, but it's just as fun. Like Miami's definitely more clubbing and things like that, while Fort Lauderdale has more bars. They do have some clubs, they have some dive bars, and there's different things to go and do, which is nice because, let's face it, not everyone wants to go out and go clubbing every night, but you can go to places like the Wharf, which is really fun. It's right there on the river, and they have little food trucks in the front, some giant Jenga, giant Connect 4, and then they do have a bar in the back as well where you can see the water, and that's cool. We used to have Township, it closed, RIP, but now we're getting a tin roof, which is gonna be fun. So that'll be the second tin roof of all of South Florida. The other one's in Delray on Atlantic Avenue, so that's cool. We have rooftop bars, we have clubs like that of Sway, beer garden. So there's a lot of different avenues for people to go and do, as well as the bars on the beach. And one of the best ones, and probably one of the oldest ones, is Elbow Room, right there on the corner of Los Olas and A1A. Like, that's a mainstay. You have to at least to go experience it one time in your life. And yes, it's a huge spring break spot, but during the non-spring break time, it's really popular as well, and it's like kind of casual, which is really cool. You can go out, grab a bite to eat, and then head over to the Elbow Room, and it's nothing like too serious. We get to get ready. Oh, we're not going out till 11:30 now. You can just go hang out, chillax, and then go home. Another great pro of living in Fort Lauderdale is the job market. So it's definitely growing, and it's an extremely diverse job market at the same time. So, I mean, Florida in general, like tourism and hospitality is like the mainstay and the main staple. And that's a huge factor in Fort Lauderdale. But we also have a lot of other industries as well that are growing. So two of the big ones that are growing are the finance and tech industry, with a lot of companies actually moving to South Florida and bringing jobs. When they say Miami, they mean the entire South Florida area. So that's Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade. And a lot of them are bringing jobs to Fort Lauderdale, which is really nice. And that downtown Fort Lauderdale area is really growing. On top of that, we do have a lot of jobs that pertain to the marine industry because, number one, we are the yachting capital of the world. So there's jobs in that industry and just boating in general. It doesn't have to be mega yachts, like even just like a 17-footer. There's jobs around that. They need parts, they need labor, like all those different things. So that's another industry that's big, as well as the port. So pretty much anything to do with the port. We're not as big as the Port of Miami, but we still have a lot of things coming in, a lot of cruise ships. So you kind of get a little balance between imports and exports in the port, as well as the tourism hospitality with cruise ships. So those are the pros and the cons of living in Fort Lauderdale. So let me know in the comments down below, what do you think that I left out that I probably should have covered? Or are there anything that really made you decide like, hey, I now want to move to Fort Lauderdale? Let me know down below. And if you or anyone you know are looking to make a move to Fort Lauderdale or Florida in general, my team and I would love to help you guys out in any way that we can. Shoot me a text, give me a phone call, or even shoot me an email, and we're happy to help you.